The weirdest thing about that night wasn't that I found her bra under the bed, it was that it wasn't hers. That's what got me. That's what flipped something in my brain and made me stop breathing for a full 5 seconds. It wasn't even hidden well, just sort of half-tucked beneath the mattress like someone kicked it under there in a rush, and I only saw it because I was on all fours looking for a damn shoe. I remember freezing, still holding one of my sneakers in my hand, staring at this black lacy thing like it was some kind of puzzle I had to solve. I turned my head, stared at it a little longer, then reached out and picked it up. That thing felt like a live wire in my hand. I didn't even have to think. I knew it wasn't Jenna's. She hated lace. Always said it was scratchy. Always bought the same dull-colored, practical bras, ones she could toss in the wash without a second thought. This one was too new, too delicate, and too bold for her style. And that, right there, was the beginning of the end. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed holding that stupid thing in my hand, feeling like my skin didn't quite fit anymore. Everything was suddenly too quiet. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, it all felt like it was holding its breath. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, not yet. It was the waiting. I didn't want to jump to conclusions like some paranoid lunatic, so I sat there and tried to come up with a normal explanation. Maybe it was hers, bought on a whim. Maybe a friend stayed over. Maybe it was from some forgotten laundry day, something mixed up in our stuff by accident. But no matter how many stories I told myself, none of them made sense. It didn't smell like her. It smelled like vanilla and something floral, and Jenna wore citrusy crap she bought from that overpriced place in the mall. When she got home, I didn't say a word at first. I couldn't. I was too busy watching her. Watching the way she kicked her shoes off in the hallway like always, dropped her keys in the bowl, walked in with that tired little groan like she'd been working all day. I asked her how work was, and she gave me the usual spiel about her boss being a jackass, about a client who couldn't make up their mind, about how she was starving and needed a shower. I followed her into the kitchen, my eyes locked on her back, and I asked something I hadn't asked in months. Hey, you want a drink? She turned around, surprised, like she wasn't sure who I was for a second. Yeah, sure, she said. Something cold. As she stepped into the bathroom, I pulled the bra out of the drawer I'd shoved it in and just stared at it. I held it behind my back when she came out, hair damp and wearing that old oversized t-shirt I bought her 3 Christmases ago. Can I ask you something? I said. She looked up from her phone and gave me that half-distracted nod. I held it up, watched the color drain from her face, and asked one question. Whose is this? There was a beat. Just a moment where she didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't even move. Then she laughed. Laughed like I just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Where'd you find that? She asked, trying to act casual. I didn't answer. I just kept looking at her. That's when the cracks started to show. Her voice went higher, just slightly, and she added, It's probably from that weekend when your cousin's wife stayed over, remember? They slept in our room. She wears a 32A, I said, my voice quieter than I expected. This thing could hold a goddamn grapefruit. That was the first real lie. The first time I knew for sure she was going to stand there and try to convince me that something was true when both of us knew it wasn't. And it wasn't just the lie. It was how fast she said it. How ready she was. Like she had practiced. You know when people say they feel something inside them break? That's not how it felt for me. For me, it felt like something clicked into place. Like a part of me that had been asleep for years just woke up. And it wasn't sad. It wasn't even angry. It was cold, calm, and ready. That's when I decided I wasn't going to ask any more questions. I was going to get answers my own way. I spent the next morning pretending everything was normal. I made coffee like I always did, didn't mention the bra again, and sat across from Jenna at the kitchen table while she scrolled through her phone like the night before hadn't happened. She wasn't even trying to cover it up anymore. That made me wonder just how deep I was in it, how long I'd been sitting in the middle of something I didn't even know was happening. When she left for work, I waited exactly 7 minutes before going back upstairs to check the bedroom again. I needed something solid. Something that couldn't be talked away or explained with a lazy excuse. The bra was just the beginning, I knew that now. I started with her side of the closet. Every drawer, every shelf, everything that had her fingerprints on it. There was nothing too obvious, but her overnight bag was missing. That was strange. She never used that unless we were traveling together or she was going somewhere for work. And as far as I knew, she hadn't left town in months. I checked the hallway closet next, digging through the coats and boots, and that's where I found the box. Just a plain cardboard one, tucked behind a pair of rain boots we hadn't used in over a year. Inside were a pair of heels I'd never seen her wear, another bra that definitely wasn't the kind she usually bought, and a receipt from a hotel not even 10 miles from our house. One night, $149.87, charged to her credit card 2 Fridays ago. She told me she was working late on a campaign launch. That was the moment everything changed for me. Not the bra, not the weird perfume, that receipt. That was real. That was concrete. She couldn't twist this into something else or call it a misunderstanding. I stared at the date on the slip and thought about that night. I'd stayed home, ordered takeout, and binged some documentary on crimes in small towns. I remember texting her around 10, asking if she was coming home. She'd said, just finishing up, be there soon, and came home close to midnight. I had no reason not to believe her. And now I knew exactly where she was instead. I didn't go to work that day. I told my manager something came up and took my laptop to a coffee shop across town. I needed space, and I didn't want to sit in the same house where all of this was happening. While I sat there pretending to do emails, I opened our shared calendar on my phone. That was something we'd used for years to track plans, appointments, things like that. She had 3 days marked client dinners over the past month. I wrote those dates down and did some digging through our bank account, which thankfully we still kept joint. On 2 of those nights, she'd withdrawn cash. Not a lot, just enough to not leave a paper trail for anything specific. But one night had another charge from that same hotel. Same rate, same location. I couldn't sit still anymore. I left the coffee shop and went straight to the hotel. I don't know what I thought I'd get from showing up in the middle of the day, but I had to see it. I walked in, calm and polite, and asked to speak with the manager. I told him I was doing a little digging on my credit card charges and wasn't sure about a couple of hotel stays my wife had apparently booked. I showed him the receipts and asked if there was any information he could provide. The guy was hesitant at first, but after some careful talking, he looked up the records. He said he couldn't give me names or guest lists, but he did confirm the reservations were checked in under her name, and both stays were for a single night, single guest. That last part made my stomach flip. She hadn't even bothered to pretend it was a business trip with colleagues. I asked one more question before I left. Do you have security footage from the lobby on those nights? The guy blinked at me, clearly uncomfortable. We do, he said. But I can't release it to anyone who isn't law enforcement. Even if the card was mine? I asked. He shook his head. I'm sorry, sir. I nodded and walked out without another word. I wasn't mad at him. He was doing his job. But now I knew everything I needed to know. She wasn't just cheating, she was doing it casually, routinely, without even trying to hide it anymore. She wasn't worried about being caught. That meant she didn't respect me enough to think I'd even notice. That night, she came home around 6. I had dinner already on the table, candles lit like it was some kind of anniversary. She looked surprised, confused, maybe even a little guilty, but she didn't say anything. Just sat down and started eating like it wasn't the beginning of the end. Halfway through, I asked her about work. She said it was fine. I nodded and said I was thinking about taking some time off. Maybe even planning a little trip for the 2 of us. She paused for a second, looked at me like she was trying to figure something out, then smiled and said, that sounds nice. And right then, I knew. I knew she was still lying. I knew the man she was sleeping with wasn't just a fling. He was someone she was willing to risk our entire life for. I smiled back at her, finished my dinner, and said, yeah, we could use a reset. She nodded, not knowing what I really meant. She had no idea what was coming next. She thought I was still in the dark. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I waited 3 more days before doing anything. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed to be ready. I needed to watch her, talk to her, and hear her voice lie to me while I planned every single word I was going to say when I finally put everything on the table. On the outside, I was calm. I acted like nothing was wrong. I even kissed her goodnight, asked her about her meetings, complimented her on her outfits, and folded her laundry like the husband she probably thought I had stopped being years ago. But inside, everything was boiling. Every little glance, every text she responded to with that quick flick of her eyes toward me, every time she picked up her phone and walked into the other room, I kept a mental log of it all. And I remembered everything. The confrontation wasn't planned down to the minute, but I knew when it would happen. Saturday. She always slept in on Saturdays, always took her time in the shower, and then would sit with her laptop in the living room like she was catching up on emails. That gave me a window. I woke up early, already dressed, already packed. I had her phone in my hand by 7 a.m. and had transferred every suspicious photo, text, and receipt I had found over the last week to a folder on my own device. I didn't need everything, just enough. Enough to make sure there was no doubt in her mind when the time came. When she finally came into the kitchen around 10, yawning like a teenager and acting like this was just another slow morning, I had already made coffee. She thanked me, sat down, and opened her laptop. I let her sit in silence for a few minutes, sipping her drink and scrolling like nothing was wrong. Then I pulled my phone out, opened the folder, and slid it across the table. She looked at it, confused. Then back up at me. "What's this?" "I want you to look at it," I said. She tapped the screen. The first thing that came up was a photo. Her, sitting in the hotel bar. She looked at it for a second too long, like she was trying to figure out how to explain it. Her fingers froze. "Where did you get this?" "I've been watching," I said. "I've been paying attention. You think you've been careful, but you haven't. You've been sloppy. And I've got everything I need." Her face changed. She went from confusion to panic to defense all in one breath. She closed the screen, pushed the phone away, and leaned back in her chair. "That's not what it looks like." "Then tell me what it is." She opened her mouth, then closed it, looked at the ceiling, then finally said, "It was just one night. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen. I've got 2 receipts," I said. 2 separate nights. 2 hotel stays. Same place. Same credit card. She hesitated again, then rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Fine. Twice. It happened twice. It's not ongoing. Do you want to keep going with this game?" I asked. "Because I can open the rest of the files. I can show you the messages. I can quote them if you want." Her face went pale. She knew I had her. She knew there was no way out now. "Who is he?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Is he married?" Still nothing. "Is it someone from work?" She finally looked at me, her voice low. "He doesn't matter. He matters enough that you snuck around, lied, made excuses, and risked everything we built." Her expression hardened. "And what exactly did we build, Ryan? A quiet house? A routine? You think I cheated because I wanted to destroy everything? I was bored. I was lonely. You haven't touched me in months." "That's not true," I said, my voice sharper now. "I've tried. I've asked. You shut me out. Every time. You stopped trying," she shot back. "You got comfortable. You thought I'd just keep being here, even when I felt like I didn't matter anymore. So instead of talking to me, you went and found someone else? You let him inside the same hotel room we used on our last anniversary?" That hit her. I saw it. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She didn't have anything left. "You want me to say I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You want me to cry and beg for forgiveness. But I'm not going to. Because I'm tired. And honestly, you should have seen it coming." I stood up then, calmly, picked up my phone, grabbed the envelope I had left on the counter, and slid it toward her. "What's this?" she asked, not even touching it. "Divorce papers," I said. "You don't have to sign them now. But you will. Because I'm done." "You're really doing this?" "You did this," I said. "I'm just making it official." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, staring at the envelope like it was some kind of foreign object she couldn't make sense of. I walked out without another word. Leaving the house wasn't enough for me. The moment I stepped outside, it became obvious that walking away wasn't going to give me peace. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I wanted her to feel something that would stick with her longer than a few uncomfortable nights on the couch or a brief apology. She handed out betrayal like it was nothing, and I wasn't about to let that slide with a handshake and a signature. So I went home to my brother's place, dropped my bag by the door, and started making calls. Not to friends, not to family. I called our accountant, our lawyer, and my boss. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right, and I wasn't going to lose anything in the process. We had one joint bank account and separate savings. That part was easy. I moved my half into a different bank under my name alone. She wouldn't notice for a while. She didn't track the finances much, left that up to me, which made this part of it satisfying. I then made sure to reroute my paycheck, cancel any subscriptions that tied us together, and change the passwords on every streaming service and smart home device I'd paid for over the years. It was petty, sure, but she'd been living in convenience for long enough, and I wasn't about to let her keep enjoying the benefits of our marriage when she'd already checked out. After that, I took it further. I went through every photo we had stored online, years of vacations, birthdays, holidays, and backed them all up to my own hard drive. I didn't delete them, just locked them out of her reach. She could beg for copies if she ever wanted them again. I left one photo on the shared drive, her at the hotel bar, laughing with the man she swore didn't matter. It would be the first thing she saw if she tried to reminisce. Next came the message. I wasn't interested in drama, but I needed people to know what happened, not because I needed pity, but because I wanted to control the narrative before she had a chance to spin it into something that made her look like a victim. I wrote one short email, attached the hotel receipts, the screenshots of her messages, and sent it to two people, her sister and her best friend. People she confided in. People who'd always ask me why I looked tired, distant, like I wasn't quite present. Now they'd know. I didn't add any commentary, just facts. Let them decide how they felt about it. I didn't need to hear anything back from them. And I didn't. Then, I did something I know she would never have expected. I booked a dinner reservation at her favorite restaurant. The one we hadn't been to in nearly a year. The one she always said we should go back to, but somehow never had time for. I used her name when I called. Said it was for two. Said it was our anniversary. Then, just an hour before the reservation time, I canceled it online and left a note that the guests would no longer need a table due to personal betrayal. It didn't matter if they read it or not. It was for me. A small satisfaction, knowing I took back something she loved and ruined it in one sentence. The biggest hit, though, was the lease renewal. The house was in my name. She'd moved into it when we got married, and while we split the mortgage payments, everything legal sat on my side of the fence. I talked to the lawyer, confirmed that as long as I filed for separation with cause, I could legally request she vacate the property. It wouldn't be overnight, but the clock would start. I filed the paperwork that week, dropped off the formal notice, and emailed her copies for good measure. I knew it would sting. She didn't have a backup plan. She assumed I'd either forgive her or drag my feet through the process while she figured things out. But I wasn't going to give her that. She could go stay with him if he was really worth it. One evening, a few days after the papers were served, she called me. Not to apologize. Not to beg. Just to ask, did you really send that email to Emily and Nicole? I did, I said, without hesitation. There was silence on the line, long enough that I thought she might have hung up. But then she said, you didn't need to humiliate me. I didn't yell. I didn't laugh. I just told her the truth. You didn't think twice about humiliating me. You lied to me, shared a bed with someone else, and came home to pretend nothing happened. You created this. You don't get to complain about the consequences. She didn't say anything else. She hung up. The next day, I got a message from one of her coworkers. Not someone I knew well, but we'd spoken at office parties. All it said was, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I didn't reply. This wasn't revenge for the sake of it. This was making sure she understood that her decisions had weight. That you don't get to burn down something and then act surprised when the smoke chokes you. I wasn't interested in hurting her for fun. I just wanted her to feel the isolation she put me through for months, except this time, it was real. It was 2 weeks after I served her the papers when she finally asked to talk. Not a call, not a text. She actually came to my brother's house, rang the bell, and waited. I wasn't planning to see her again in person until court, but I also didn't want to hide. My brother was out, and the house was quiet. I opened the door, said nothing, and stepped aside. She walked in like she didn't know what to expect, like this was unfamiliar territory even though she used to spend her weekends in this same living room. She didn't sit until I did. She looked nervous, more nervous than I'd seen her since the night I showed her the photo. I don't want to fight, she said. I just want to talk. That's all. I nodded, kept my arms crossed, and leaned back into the chair. She waited for some sign that I was going to make this easy. I didn't give her one. I've been trying to think about what to say, she began. And I know that probably sounds ridiculous, but I've never had to have a conversation like this before. I didn't answer, just watched her. She looked thinner, like she hadn't been sleeping. I didn't feel bad about it. I just noticed. I don't know why I did what I did, she continued. That's the truth. I've been replaying everything in my head. When it started, why it happened, what I was looking for. And none of it makes sense. I can't sit here and tell you I was unhappy the whole time, because I wasn't. I can't tell you I planned any of this. I didn't. You made a choice, I said. You made the same choice more than once. I know, she said. I know I did. And I have to live with that. I just wanted you to know that I'm not here to fix anything. I know I can't. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough, I said. She nodded quickly. It's not. You're right. I know it's not. We sat in silence for a minute. It wasn't comfortable. It was heavy. I could feel her staring at the floor, waiting for me to ask her something, maybe give her a chance to explain it all in some neat little paragraph that would make me feel better. I wasn't looking for closure. I already had everything I needed. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. I thought maybe I could get past it, that I could stop, and it wouldn't affect us. But then it became a habit, and I kept pushing the guilt down, and every time you were kind to me or tried to reconnect, it made me feel worse, but I kept doing it anyway. And then I hated myself, and then I hated you for not noticing, and I don't even know how it got to that point. But it did. I noticed, I said. I just didn't want to believe it. She finally looked up. So what now? Are we really doing this? Are we really ending everything? We already ended it, I said. You ended it when you gave someone else what should have belonged to us. I just followed through. She blinked a few times, then looked around like she expected something to jump out and interrupt this. Like maybe the weight of it all would make her change her mind. Like maybe I'd change mine. I didn't. I'm not with him, she said. Not anymore. He was never going to leave his wife. I don't even think he cared about me that much. I think I was just something he liked having in secret. That's your problem, I said. Not mine. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I just wanted to talk to you like two people who shared a life, who built something together, who had good years, even if they ended badly. I sat forward. You want to talk about the good years now? The years you rewrote the second you started sneaking around behind my back? The vacations, the holidays, the small things, none of that means anything when you burn it all down without warning. She didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. I need to know what happens next, she said quietly. What happens next is simple, I said. You move out. You find a place. You take what's legally yours. We go to court, we settle, and we never speak again unless we absolutely have to. She nodded slowly. And if I ever want to make things right? You can't, I said. You already made them wrong. You don't get a do-over. She stood up. I didn't. She looked down at me, waiting, maybe for a flicker of something. I gave her nothing. I'll sign the papers, she said. You should. And with that, she left. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. No courtroom drama. No dragged-out arguments. She signed where she had to, answered the lawyer's questions, and left before I could even see her in the hallway. I didn't expect anything more from her, and I didn't want it. Once the paperwork was done, I packed the last of my things and moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No reminders on the walls, no shared closets, no traces of the life I used to have with her. Just space. Space to figure out what came next without the constant reminder of everything I had to let go. The thing I didn't expect was how quiet everything felt once it was over. Not lonely, just quiet. There was no one asking me about dinner plans, no conversations about the weekend, no background noise of someone else's presence in the house. At first, it felt strange, like something was missing. But eventually, that quiet started to feel like relief. I stopped checking the time to see when she'd come home. I stopped wondering what kind of mood she'd be in. I stopped thinking about her altogether unless someone brought her up, which didn't happen much after the truth got out. The few people who knew kept their distance. Some offered support, most didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. It's not the kind of situation where anyone has useful advice. You find out the person you trusted the most had been lying to you, and there's no script for how to move on from that. You just wake up, go to work, do your errands, and try not to think about the fact that the person you built a life with turned it into a joke when you weren't looking. Eventually, the sting fades, but the memory doesn't. That part stays. One night, a friend of mine invited me out for drinks. It had been a while since I said yes to anything that involved being social, but I agreed. We sat at a small bar downtown, the kind of place that's too dim to tell if the beer is good or not, but the company makes up for it. At some point during the second drink, he asked, "So, you think you'll ever start dating again?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the glass, thought about how weird that question felt. Like starting over was as simple as signing up for some app or saying yes to coffee. I finally said, "Not yet." He nodded. "She really did a number on you, huh?" "She taught me something," I said. "She taught me that even when things feel stable, you can still be completely wrong about everything." He didn't push further. He didn't have to. Later that night, back at my apartment, I thought about all the things I could have done differently. Maybe I should have noticed sooner. Maybe I should have asked more questions. Maybe I should have said no to the nights when she worked late and said yes more often to the times she wanted to be left alone. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that none of it would have made a difference. She cheated because she wanted to, not because of anything I did or didn't do. She had the opportunity, and she took it. That's the end of the story. A week after the divorce, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a letter. Her handwriting. 1 page. It didn't say much. Just a few lines about how she hoped I found peace, how she regretted the way things ended, and how she'd always remember the good years. I folded it once, dropped it in the trash, and moved on with my day. That was the last time I heard from her. Now, I work, I sleep, I eat, I go for walks when I feel restless. Life is simpler. It's not happier yet, but it's real. No lies, no secrets. I trust my space because I know who's in it. Just me. And that's enough for now. If anyone ever asks me what I learned from all this, I'll tell them this. If you ever feel like something's off, it probably is. If you find yourself questioning the honesty of someone you love, don't ignore it just because you're afraid of the answer. The truth doesn't get smaller the longer you wait to face it. It grows. It grows until it breaks everything around it. But the good news? You can survive it. You can come out the other side not better, not stronger, just clearer. You can figure out what matters when there's nothing left. And you'll realize that starting over doesn't have to look like winning. It just has to look like freedom. And that's exactly what I have now.